The story opens with a day that was never meant to change lives, yet destiny had other plans. The arrogant millionaire, a man who had always believed the world bent to his will, was behind the wheel of his luxury car, consumed by thoughts of business meetings, power deals, and the next million he would earn. He was a man defined by control, precise, commanding, untouchable. But in a single, unexpected moment, that illusion of control shattered. The sound of screeching tires tore through the air, followed by a sickening thud that silenced his thoughts and froze time itself. On the pavement lay a woman, fragile, motionless, and unknown to him, yet destined to become the most defining chapter of his life. Panic was not an emotion he was used to, yet in that instant, it gripped him completely. For the first time, his wealth, power, and arrogance meant nothing. He stumbled out of the car, his hands trembling as he approached her. Her face, pale and calm even in pain, haunted him instantly. The crowd that gathered whispered accusations, and the flashing red lights of an approaching ambulance blurred into the background. He tried to speak, to explain, but the weight of guilt crushed every word in his throat. That night, as he sat alone in his mansion, surrounded by silence and regret, he realized that something within him had changed. A crack had formed in his otherwise unshakable armor. Days later, he learned her name. The woman he had accidentally run over was someone ordinary, yet extraordinary in spirit. She wasn't just another name in a lawsuit, or another problem to fix with money. She was someone who had dreams, responsibilities, and a quiet resilience that made him feel small in comparison. Visiting her in the hospital was not something his pride allowed at first, but guilt forced his hand. When he finally did, her reaction stunned him. There was no hatred in her eyes, only disappointment. That disappointment burned more than anger ever could. It was as if she could see right through him, past the arrogance, past the wealth, into the emptiness he had carefully hidden. The collision, though accidental, was not merely a physical event. It was symbolic. It represented the crash between two worlds, one driven by greed and ego, the other grounded in emotion and humanity. For her, it was pain and recovery. For him, it was awakening. He began questioning the life he led, the empire he had built, and the person he had become. The media called it an unfortunate accident, but deep inside he knew it was fate intervening, breaking his perfect world to show him something real. The more he tried to move on, the more she haunted his thoughts. Her silence spoke louder than any accusation. Her strength, despite suffering, humiliated his false sense of power. He couldn't escape the feeling that his life had been empty before that moment. The accident was not the end of something. It was the beginning of a story neither of them saw coming. A story written by guilt, fate, and the unexpected bond that would soon grow from the ashes of that fateful collision. After the accident, the millionaire believed he could fix everything the same way he always did, with money. Compensation, apologies delivered through lawyers, and a few carefully chosen words to the press. But fate had a cruel sense of irony, one that didn't bend to his arrogance. When his family and hers became entangled in the aftermath, something entirely unexpected happened. An arrangement that would tie their lives together in a way neither of them could escape. Her family, bound by traditional values and societal pressure, wanted
security for their daughter's uncertain future. His family, terrified of scandal and public disgrace, wanted to silence the whispers before they grew too loud. What began as a desperate solution turned into an agreement sealed with signatures, not love. An arranged marriage between the man who caused her pain and the woman who refused to be defined by it. When the news was delivered to him, he laughed. The very idea that he, a man of power and influence, would marry a woman he barely knew, and one he had injured, was absurd. But behind closed doors, his father's voice carried the weight of generations of reputation. "You owe this," his father said coldly, "not just to her, but to yourself." The words pierced his pride, yet deep inside, he knew it was true. There was a debt he couldn't pay in money alone. Still, he entered the marriage with his arrogance intact, believing it would be a short-term arrangement, a means to an end. He underestimated her completely. The woman he married was nothing like he expected. She was not meek or submissive. She did not seek revenge, nor did she crave his wealth. She carried herself with quiet dignity, her presence a constant reminder of his guilt and her strength. Every interaction between them was laced with tension, his coldness clashing against her calm defiance. She refused to play the role of a victim or a trophy wife, and that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. The mansion that once echoed with his authority now felt smaller, confined by her silence and his frustration. In public, they were the perfect couple, a photograph of unity for the world to see. In private, they were strangers forced into the same orbit, circling each other with unspoken emotions. Sometimes he'd catch her looking out the window late at night, lost in thoughts he couldn't reach. He didn't understand her, but he wanted to. Slowly, curiosity replaced indifference, and guilt began to evolve into something he couldn't name. She wasn't just a reminder of his mistake. She was becoming the only person who challenged his beliefs about control, worth, and love. The arrangement, meant to be a burden, became a test. Every day forced him to confront himself, the man behind the arrogance. And though he didn't realize it yet, that forced marriage was not his punishment, but his redemption waiting to unfold. It was the universe's way of binding two broken souls together so that each could heal what the other had lost. Their marriage began as a battlefield where silence was sharper than words. Every morning felt like a war fought in glances and gestures. He avoided her out of guilt and pride, while she avoided him out of resentment and disbelief that fate had tied her to the man who once nearly taken her life. The mansion was filled with luxury, but between them lay a gulf of unspoken pain. He buried himself in work, pretending everything was fine, yet her quiet presence followed him like a shadow he couldn't escape. She didn't confront him with accusations, and somehow that hurt more. Her calm indifference made him question himself in ways he never had before. For the first time in his life, his confidence began to crumble, not because of business rivals, but because of a woman's silent strength. Every small moment between them carried tension, brushing past each other in the hallway, dining together without speaking, or accidentally locking eyes across the room. She didn't seek pity, and that unsettled him. He had met countless people who fawned over his wealth, but she
wasn't one of them. Instead, she challenged his ego without uttering a word. When she finally did speak, it wasn't out of anger, but honesty. "You can't buy forgiveness," she said one evening, her voice calm but firm. Those 5 words hit harder than any accusation. They stripped away the armor he had worn all his life, exposing a part of him he didn't recognize, vulnerable, ashamed, and desperate to make things right. As days turned into weeks, his perception of her began to shift. He started noticing the small details about her, the way she smiled faintly while tending to the garden, the patience in her voice when she spoke to the house staff, the quiet determination in her eyes. Beneath her fragility was an unbreakable will that fascinated him. He found himself drawn to her not out of guilt anymore, but admiration. He started helping her in small ways, offering a ride, sharing breakfast, fixing things she struggled with. These gestures were his unspoken apologies. But she didn't let them soften her too easily. She wanted sincerity, not convenience. The turning point came during a stormy night when a power outage left the entire house in darkness. She had lit a candle and sat near the window, watching the rain. He joined her, unexpectedly vulnerable. In that dim light, he confessed his fear, not of losing money or status, but of losing himself. It was the first time she saw the man behind the arrogance. The tension between them melted, replaced by something neither dared to name. A fragile bond began forming, built not on attraction alone, but understanding born from pain. Their relationship evolved slowly, like dawn breaking after a long night. They began to talk, to listen, and to care in ways they hadn't intended. Hatred gave way to compassion, and pride gave way to humility. He realized that the woman he once viewed as a mistake was the only person capable of showing him what love truly meant, not perfection, but forgiveness and growth. Redemption did not come to him in a single moment of revelation, but in quiet, persistent waves that reshaped him from the inside out. The arrogant millionaire, who once measured life in numbers and power, began to see meaning in things he had never noticed before. The sound of her laughter, the warmth of shared silence, the comfort of knowing someone understood him without words. What began as guilt slowly transformed into something deeper, a need to be worthy of her forgiveness, not through grand gestures or expensive gifts, but through change. He started letting go of the walls he had built around himself, the pride that had once defined him. For the first time, he wasn't trying to impress the world. He was simply trying to become a better man for her. He began taking responsibility, not just for the accident, but for the kind of man he had been. He reached out to the people he had once ignored, treated his employees with respect, and learned the value of empathy, something he had never understood before she entered his life. Every day with her was a lesson in humility. She didn't demand his love, she inspired it. She didn't ask him to change, she became the reason he wanted to. Her presence softened his anger, her patience healed his guilt, and her quiet forgiveness made him see what true strength looked like. He realized that love wasn't about control or possession. It was about surrender and understanding. The transformation didn't go unnoticed. People around him saw the difference. The once cold and commanding businessman now carried a gentleness that surprised everyone. But it was her who noticed it the most. She saw the way he looked at her differently now, not with arrogance, but with gratitude. When she finally smiled at him without hesitation, it felt like the world had shifted. It was then he understood that redemption isn't earned through words, it's lived through actions. He had hurt her once, unintentionally, but now every choice he made was to protect, cherish, and honor her. Their relationship blossomed from a place of pain into something beautiful and rare. The same fate that had brought them together in tragedy now united them in love. The mansion that once felt like a cage turned into a home filled with laughter and light. He still carried the guilt of that night, but it no longer consumed him. It reminded him of how far he had come. She too had healed, learning that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but freeing herself from the past. In the end, love became their redemption. The man who once had everything learned that true wealth wasn't in money or status, but in a heart capable of love.
The woman who had every reason to hate him found peace in his transformation. Together, they proved that even the deepest wounds could heal when love is genuine, and that sometimes fate doesn't break people to punish them, but to rebuild them into something extraordinary.